Welcome to Unit 8, The Reform Movement. Lesson 3, The Abolition Movement. Reformers in the 19th century didn't have cell phones or social media to spread the word. Instead, they wrote letters and newspaper articles, gave speeches, and even sent secret messages to communicate their ideas. Voices against slavery. Abolitionists relied on shocking testimonials and appeals to good conscience in their fight to end slavery. They dared to write and publish newspaper articles to condemn the injustices of slavery. Others marshaled their strength to stand on stage and share the indignities they had witnessed or personally endured. In the first issue of The Liberator, William Lloyd Garrison called slavery America's all-conquering sin. He wrote, "I do not wish to think or to speak or write with moderation. I will not equivocate, I will not excuse, I will not retreat a single inch, and I will be heard." Garrison also helped to found the American Anti-Slavery Society, members of which appear at a convention in Pennsylvania in this 1951 photo. He would ally with women and men, African American and white, and wealthy and poor in his decades-long fight against slavery. Two sisters, Sarah Grimke and Angelina Grimke, witnessed the cruelty of slavery firsthand while growing up on their parents' plantation in South Carolina. When the sisters took up the abolitionist cause, as some Southerners did, their family disowned them. These determined women joined the Quakers and traveled the country giving speeches in support of abolition. In 1863, Angelina Grimke married another fellow abolitionist, Theodore Weld, a trainer and recruiter for the American Anti-Slavery Society. Standing up for freedom, both free and enslaved African Americans actively challenged the existence of slavery. David Walker was a free African American man who wrote for Freedom's Journal, an abolitionist newspaper. As the owner of a second-hand clothing store in Boston in the 1820s, Walker printed anti-slavery pamphlets and sewed them into the pockets of clothing he sold to sailors. Walker hoped the pamphlets would reach people in many ports, especially those in the South. One of his pamphlets, entitled An Appeal to the Colored Citizens of the World, became one of the most radical anti-slavery documents of the movement, and Southern states reacted by prohibiting the circulation of abolitionist literature. Another African American abolitionist was Charles Raymond, who was born into a wealthy, free African American family in Salem, Massachusetts. He worked as an agent of the Massachusetts Anti-Slavery Society, and he traveled and spoke with Garrison, Phillips, and others. Robert Purvis was the son of a wealthy cotton broker and a free African American woman. When he was 9 years old, his family moved from South Carolina to Philadelphia. As an adult, Purvis became very active in abolition and in the Underground Railroad. In fact, he and his wife, Harriet Fortin, housed escapees in their home, also known as the Purvis Safe House. African American women played a significant role in the abolitionist movement. Harriet Jacobs, born into slavery, escaped to New York in 1842. She published Incidents in the Life of a Slave Girl in 1861, considered one of the most extensive slave narratives written by a woman. Sojourner Truth was also a powerful abolitionist voice. Like Tubman and Jacobs, Truth was born into slavery. When she told a white neighbor that her owner broke his promise to release her, the neighbor paid the owner $20 for her and then set her free. She changed her enslaved name, Isabella, to Sojourner Truth. She captivated people with her simple, clear message that all people deserve the same rights as white men. Harriet Tubman and the Underground Railroad. If you didn't know better, you might think the Underground Railroad was similar to a city subway. In reality, this amazing railroad never had a single mile of track. In the years before the Civil War, the Underground Railroad was a path to freedom for enslaved African Americans, and its most famous conductor was Harriet Tubman. Tubman was born into slavery with a different name, Araminta Ross, around 1822, in Dorchester County, Maryland. Minty, as she was called, was first put to work at 5 years old. By the time she was 7 years old, she was cleaning her master's house and taking care of the family's baby. Throughout her childhood and youth, Minty was forced to do difficult jobs, both indoors and out in the fields. She was poorly fed and often beaten by her masters. However, hard work and cruel punishments never crushed Minty's independent nature. In 1844, Minty married John Tubman, a free black man living in Maryland. Despite her marriage to a free man, she remained enslaved. That meant she could be sold to another owner far from her husband, possibly in the South, where conditions for slaves were even worse. In 1849, Minty learned that she might be sold, so she resolved to flee to Pennsylvania, the free state north of Maryland. As part of her escape, she changed her name to Harriet Tubman. Harriet was her mother's name. Tubman, of course, was her husband's. John Tubman chose to stay in Dorchester County, so Harriet was left to make the risky journey to freedom on her own. One of the people who helped Tubman escape was a Quaker woman. Quakers believed that all people, regardless of their skin color, were created equal and that slavery was wrong. An unnamed woman sheltered Tubman for a night and helped her enter the Underground Railroad. The Underground Railroad had no trains, nor was it a single path to freedom. Instead, it was a network of ways that enslaved people could escape to the northern states or Canada. An Underground Railroad station was a home or other building in which escaped slaves could take shelter and hide. Conductors risked their lives to guide groups of fugitive slaves on the perilous trek from the South and help them navigate the railroad's hidden network. Because the Underground Railroad operated in deep secrecy, nobody knows exactly how many enslaved people it brought to freedom. One estimate is that around 100,000 people made their way to freedom and safety via the Underground Railroad between 1810 and 1860. Although there were some white supporters on the Underground Railroad, such as the Quakers, free African Americans in the North played the most active role in operating the Underground Railroad, and one of them was Harriet Tubman. Now here's a video that explains more about Harriet Tubman's life.
Escaping slavery, risking everything to save her family, leading a military raid, championing the cause of women's suffrage. These are just a handful of the accomplishments of one of America's most courageous heroes. Harriet Tubman was born Araminta Ross in Dorchester County, Maryland, in the early 1820s. Born into chattel slavery, Araminta, or Minty, was the fifth of 9 children. 2 of Minty's older sisters were sold to a chain gang. Even as a small child, Minty was hired out to different owners who subjected her to whippings and punishments. Young Minty's life changed forever on an errand to a neighborhood store. There, an overseer threw a 2-pound weight at a fugitive enslaved person, missed, and struck Minty instead. Her injury caused her to experience sleeping spells, which we know of today as narcolepsy, for the rest of her life. Minty's owner tried to sell her, but there were no buyers for an enslaved person who fell into sleeping spells. She was instead put to work with her father, Ben Ross, who taught her how to lumber. Lumbering increased Minty's physical strength and put her in touch with free black sailors who shipped the wood to the north. From them, Minty learned about the secret communications that occurred along trade routes, information that would prove invaluable later in her life. In this mixed atmosphere of free and enslaved blacks working side by side, Minty met John Tubman, a free black man she married in 1844. After marriage, she renamed herself Harriet after her mother. Harriet Tubman's owner died in 1849, When his widow planned to sell off her enslaved human beings, Harriet feared she would be sold away from everyone she loved. She had heard of an underground railroad, a secret network of safe houses, boat captains, and wagon drivers willing to harbor fugitive enslaved people on their way north. So Tubman fled with two of her brothers, Ben and Harry. They eventually turned back, fearing they were lost. But in one of her sleeping spells, Harriet dreamed that she could fly like a bird. Looking down below, she saw the path to liberation, and in the autumn of 1849, she set out on her own, following the North Star to Pennsylvania and to freedom. Tubman returned to the South 13 times to free her niece, brothers, parents, and many others. She earned the nickname Black Moses and worked diligently with fellow abolitionists to help enslaved people escape, first to the North and later to Canada. Harriet Tubman worked as a Union Army nurse, scout, and spy during the Civil War. In 1863, she became the first woman in United States history to plan and lead a military raid, liberating nearly 700 enslaved persons in South Carolina. After the war, the 13th Amendment to the United States Constitution legally abolished slavery, while the 14th expanded citizenship and the 15th gave voting rights to formerly enslaved Black men. But she was undaunted, and she persisted. She raised funds for formerly enslaved persons and helped build schools and a hospital on their behalf. In 1888, Tubman became more active in the fight for women's right to vote. In 1896, she appeared at the founding convention of the National Association of Colored Women in Washington, D.C., and later at a women's suffrage meeting in Rochester, New York. There she told the audience, "I was a conductor on the Underground Railroad, and I can say what many others cannot. I never ran my train off the track, and I never lost a passenger." As her fame grew, various friends and allies helped her in the fight to collect a veteran's pension for her service in the Union Army. In 1899, she was finally granted $20 a month. In a fitting twist of fate, the United States Treasury announced in 2016 that Tubman's image will appear on a redesigned $20 bill. Harriet Tubman died on March 10, 1913. Even on her deathbed at age 91, she kept the freedom of her people in mind. Her final words were, "I go away to prepare a place for you."
Just a quick review before we end this video. Brave individuals, such as William Lloyd Garrison, Wendell Phillips, Sarah Grimke, Angelina Grimke, Theodore Weld, David Walker, Charles Raymond, Robert Purvis, Harriet Jacobs, Sojourner Truth, Harriet Tubman, spoke out against the injustices of slavery in an attempt to end the institution in the United States. The Underground Railroad was a network of people who worked together to help African Americans escape from slavery from the southern United States to the northern states, or to Canada before the Civil War. That's all for today's video.